Yeah, here it is. Here it is. Let me bring this image up. This is Trump for the next year until election day. Right here. This is Trump in the mind of every Republican primary voter for the next year until election day. Can I be clear about that? I just want to be clear that as funny as it is that we're gonna watch Trump get indicted and who knows actually possibly do a perp walk for the next year in the Republican space. Trump is Jesus Christ, okay? Maybe not literally Jesus Christ, but he is the politically prosecuted. He is the person that's being strong-armed by the deep state. Alvin Bragg is basically doing a modern legal lynching of the greatest president in the history of the United States, and this is how he's going to be viewed for the next year. And while it's very funny that they're going to view him like this for the next year, when again his crucifixion is over him using campaign funds to pay a prostitute, which is highly illegal. Do you guys remember when Jesus did that? You guys remember when Jesus used his campaign funds when he was running for president of Jerusalem to pay off one of the prostitutes? I don't remember that. It must have been in the redacted version of the original Bible. They don't show the normies like you and me. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be some funny stuff. Okay. Before I laugh myself into a tizzy, let's actually read the article. So this is how I found out. It was this post right here. Breaking news: a grand jury in New York has voted to indict Donald Trump over his role in a hush money payment to a porn star, according to 4 people with knowledge of the matter. The unprecedented arrest of a former commander-in-chief will be anything but routine. Here's what to expect when the former president is arrested. So when I saw this original post, originally I was like, oh my gosh, this is big. They're going through with it. It's actually happening. Oh my goodness. Does that mean he's going to get arrested? And then I just scrolled down a little bit and it had my question immediately answered. Yes, he's going to be arrested. The former president of the United States is going to be arrested. Let's read a little bit about how this is going to go down, okay? Oh my goodness. Mr. Trump will be the first former president to face criminal charges. The precise charges aren't known yet, but the case is focused on a hush money payment to a porn star during his 2016 campaign. Oh my goodness. The timing of Trump's indictment coincides with the end of quarter fundraising rush. Republicans expect the news to boost the Trump campaign's financial bottom line during what would already be one of the busiest times for online donations. A large group of former Trump Organization employees is sending texts quietly cheering the latest developments, a reminder of how many people have felt burned in various ways by Trump over the years. A range of Democratic-leaning organizations, there were just so many updates so quickly. A range of Democratic-leaning organizations, lawmakers, and party officials are beginning to weigh in, casting the indictment as a critical accountability measure. Trump is being held accountable for breaking the law, said Jane Kleeb, chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party. This indictment is long overdue. Step in holding Trump accountable for his flagrant disregard for our laws and democracy, said Jessica Velasquez, chair of the Democratic Party of New Mexico. The legal system is finally holding him accountable for past transgressions, but it's up to the voters to hold him accountable in his current run for president. Okay, so I could keep going through this, right? I could keep going through all this stuff. Oh, here it is. Okay, never mind. Okay. Before I talk about the effects of this, this is what I'm interested in. I got to see what Trump said. In response. Trump denounces indictment as political persecution. Donald J. Trump responded to the news that he had been indicted in a statement, calling the Manhattan grand jury vote political persecution and election interference at the highest level in history. Okay, so I find this very interesting. If it's true that this is election interference because the DA is going to charge him with the crimes he committed, well, they have to prove it in the court of law, of course. I assume the court would not be doing this unless, of course, we find out this is actual political persecution, which will be shown throughout the trial. And if it is, then hopefully the people involved are held accountable. I find that very hard to believe. But if it is true that holding somebody to account legally and that possibly coinciding with election time is election interference, then would Trump have to concede that when James Comey reopened their investigation into Hillary Clinton, even though it ended up finding nothing, it didn't reveal anything new, just the buzz around it having a negative effect on Hillary Clinton's campaign going into the 2016 election, then will Donald Trump admit that James Comey interfered on his behalf in the 2016 election, giving him the W? I don't think he would admit to that. I don't think he would admit to that at all. The thing is, if somebody's extremely high profile and running for president,
is a curd.
Shadatic_02 got a tier 1 subscription. Darn, my prime sub from gutter chat is useless. Guess I'll pay 100% to you on site chat.
That's the way to do it, Chad. Exactly. That is the smart investment decision that your mother would be proud of. Congratulations. The thing that gets me here is, if Trump was ever to be held accountable since he's gotten into politics, Trump would cast it as political persecution. If they were bringing a charge against him in 2016, right after he did it, they would say it was political persecution going into the 2016 election. If they would have done it in 2018, they would have said it was an election interference going into the 2018 midterms. 2020, same thing. 2022, same thing. In 2024, as we see, same thing. I do not see these charges being introduced at any time since Trump has been in the public eye politically, since his walk down the escalator, without Trump or somebody calling it political persecution or quote unquote election interference. And I didn't see Trump protesting when it was, Hillary Clinton in the James Comey investigation. Mr. Trump's statement echoed what has been an extraordinary and blistering effort to try to prevent the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin L. Bragg from indicting him. Still, it was remarkable in how aggressive it was against the persecution, and a signal of what else may come. The Democrats have lied, cheated, and stolen in their obsession with trying to get Trump. But now they've done the unthinkable, he wrote, indicting a completely innocent person, never committed a single crime, completely innocent, cleaner than soap, softer than a baby's bottom, very good, kind-hearted Christian man. Mr. Trump framed the investigation that resulted in the indictment as the latest in the long line of criminal inquiries he has faced, none of which have resulted in charges. The specifics of the Manhattan indictment are not yet known, but the charges are expected to center on Trump's role in hush money payments to a porn star in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. Remember it just like I do. Russia, Russia, Russia. The Mueller hoax. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Impeachment hoax 1. Impeachment hoax 2. The illegal and unconstitutional Mar-a-Lago raid. And now, dude, he lines this off like he's talking. He names these off like he's talking about hangover movies, right? I mean, it's like, first you had Russia, 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 okay? Great original. It had Rachel Maddow filling the seats, okay? But then we had to follow it up. So then we had the Mueller hoax. But then, of course, we had the third edition in the series, Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. He's naming it like it's like a TV series or a movie series, like, the Fast and Furious movie series. And he continues to, by the way, if we go through, I don't want to go through all the specifics of much of this, but a lot of this had weight to it. For example, he yells, Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. You can go listen to the Ukraine call today, where Donald Trump called Volodymyr Zelensky, and this looks 10 times worse, considering now we know that Russia has invaded Ukraine and the weapons that Trump could have sent more of or could have not delayed the sending of are vital in the defense of Ukraine against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But you can go and listen to that Trump-Ukraine call. It's very clear that Donald Trump is trying to pressure Volodymyr Zelensky. Even the Republicans who listened to it didn't really even deny this. They just kind of avoided this part altogether. It was very clear that Volodymyr Zelensky was getting pressured by Donald Trump to give Donald Trump information on Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, the people he would be running against, specifically Joe Biden, in 2020. They wanted political information about laptops or whatever the hell other nonsense that the Bidens were up to in Ukraine. He wanted political information, dirt off his political opponents in return for American aid to Ukraine. That was leveraging American funds, American support, American military equipment in exchange for a political favor. That is illegal. That is highly illegal. And him getting impeached for that is 100% above board. And then he talks about impeachment hoax twos, impeachment hoax twos, illegal raid of Mar-a-Lago, yada yada. The thing that's interesting about the Mar-a-Lago raid, and I think this doesn't get talked about enough, is the Mar-a-Lago raid coincided with the violations of the Presidential Records Act, which was the idea that Donald Trump did not properly store classified documents. In fact, he was keeping them at Mar-a-Lago Resort when he wasn't supposed to. They tried to communicate with him and tell him, like, hey, bring these documents back. He only brings a few of them back, doesn't bring the rest of them back. And it was reported that the reason he even did this in the first place wasn't even due to some grand scheme that Donald Trump was cooking up where he was going to, like, sell off American secrets to China or sell off American secrets to Russia. It seemed from the reports that I read that the reason he wanted the classified documents at Mar-a-Lago is because he thought it was cool. Very, very mature, grown-up man who is totally not a toddler and should be ruling the country. Anyway, let's continue. And he continued to paint the investigation as a large conspiracy forward by his political opponents. Though he called Mr. Bragg a disgrace in his statement, he chose to lay the blame at the feet of his successor in the Oval Office. I believe this witch hunt will backfire massively on Joe Biden, he said. I gotta be honest, I don't believe Joe Biden is at all directly involved in any way that I think is provable in what's going on right now in the Manhattan's District Attorney's Office. Like, Joe Biden did not tell them to do this. In fact, if I remember correctly, the feds specifically chose not to pursue this, and it was the Manhattan's DA office, independent of the feds, that decided that they would pursue this possible indictment. Well, now it's not a possible indictment. Now we know it's an indictment. Now we know that Donald Trump is looking to get arrested now. They did it separate of the Fed, so I don't know how we could pin this on Joe Biden in any way, right? If you want to complain about anyone, you got to go complain about Alvin Bragg. But don't complain a little too hard, because Alvin Bragg has been sent powders in envelopes that looks a lot like poison, as in people trying to, get him murdered. So as you can complain about Alvin Bragg all you want, but please do not kill him. That is my one demand, is I'm asking that the people watching at home do not murder Alvin Bragg. Oh,
a curd is a curd.
Flemmy gave Hannah _ a tier 2 subscription. I know the law. I know it better than anyone else in this courtroom.
Of course you do.
Probably. More than the judge.
Yes.
More than the prosecution.
Yes.
Trump 2025 during his...
Yes, Trump 2025 during his trial. I'm excited, man. I know the law better than even the judges. I know the law better than the entire court. I can't even be indicted. This is a fake court. This is a fake judge. I am a sovereign president, a sovereign citizen, you might say. Oh my goodness. Trump's son wasted little time speaking up. Donald Trump Jr., the former president's oldest son, opened his podcast Triggered on Thursday, saying he had heard the news 15 minutes earlier. This stuff that would make Mao, Stalin, and Pol Pot, it would make them blush. Dude, these... Okay, I'm gonna be for real. Pol Pot murdered like 30% of the population of Cambodia. He killed like an insane amount of people. Mao like publicly lynched people, like just like no questions asked. Stalin killed millions, right? He would give out lists to his henchmen in the NKVD, and they would go out and execute people with the thugs in his service. I mean, if this was anything like them, Donald Trump would be just like disappeared. He'd just be gone. Okay, sorry, Americans are unbelievably sheltered when it comes to these types of dictators. He said, adding a warning to Republicans who said he said don't support his father. Just wait until they come for you, because they will. Eric, look, okay, I have to say, if you are a politician who uses campaign funds to pay off prostitutes, right? The Manhattan's District Attorney's Office will come for you, and you should be afraid, very afraid. Eric Trump, the former president's second son, tweeted, "This is third world prosecutorial misconduct. It is the opportunistic targeting of a political opponent in a campaign year." Okay, so let's pause this for a moment, and let's give you my conclusions, because there's so much information being spilled out right now, so many updates coming out, so many statements, so many people reviewing this, so many people acting with surprise in reaction to the idea that Donald Trump might get arrested. So let me give you guys my take quickly. I've already said this while talking to Michael Tracy, and I've already said this while talking to Aircraft Sparky, and I'm just going to say it again. I view this a lot like the Al Capone trial, where Al Capone obviously committed a lot of crimes. He honestly committed crimes that were a lot worse than the tax evasion that they got him on. Murder, racketeering, kidnapping, stuff that honestly he deserved to be held accountable to a lot more than the tax fraud that he was held accountable for. But tax fraud is what they had enough evidence of. Tax fraud was the crime they could get that the witnesses wouldn't run away in fear from. Tax fraud is what they could get Al Capone on. Now, if this case turns out to be something where they were just scratching everywhere, doing everything they possibly could to just take Donald Trump down, and this is a political prosecution, and we find out through the throes of this trial that Donald Trump actually did not use campaign funds to pay off a prostitute. That did not happen. That was a lie. That $130,000 actually came from somewhere else. It wasn't campaign funds. Then we could be like, oh, okay, this was a misdemeanor. It wasn't something that he should be doing a perp walk over. Never mind. Let's reel this back in. But there's a very, 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 very strong chance that this does not end up that way. Not only because I don't think Donald Trump is necessarily the most careful man, and I could easily see him as somebody who doesn't cover up his steps and leaves evidence of the crimes he commits just about anywhere because he's just that bold and brazen. If somebody was asked me why I think he's so bold and brazen, it's because we've seen him commit these crimes very publicly and try to intimidate people out of following the law very publicly before. The example I always cite, even though there's many examples I could use, would be when he called Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, and tried to intimidate him into giving him enough votes to win the 2020 election. And when that failed, there was executive orders written up about soldiers seizing voting machines and using Rudy Giuliani to introduce fake electors, all the way up till January 6th, where he was still trying to pressure Mike Pence into overturning the results of a Democratic election. But in that call with Brad Raffensperger, he's very direct. He says, I want you to find me the votes. Just find me the votes that would be enough for me to win. And he gives him the exact number of votes, plus one, that would be necessary for him to win the 2020 presidential election. And so there's a bunch of crimes like this that you could possibly get Trump on if you had enough evidence, if you had enough witnesses, if it was just a clear cut enough, you know, because there's can be vagueness in committing of crimes where you have like 80% of the evidence, but you don't have the last 20%. There's a bunch of stuff that Trump has done that kind of falls into that category. And I think this might be the one, even though it's not the worst crime he did. It's not necessarily what would be the best for moral reasons that he's being held accountable for. But this is what they did find him on. Obviously, we still need to wait for the trial to go through its motions. We could find out that maybe they have 90% of what they need to push him on this, but they don't have that last 10%. They don't have the last 2 pieces of detail and it doesn't work. It could be. It legitimately could be. I don't think it's likely, but it could legitimately could be that this is just completely contrived and that this was just some Manhattan DA trying to make a name for himself and trying to go after the former president of the United States because he thinks he's racist. I don't think that's likely. I don't think Alvin Bragg would throw his career away like that. I don't think all the other people who looked at this case and had to consider it and take a vote on it before deciding to go through and indicting the former president of the United States, which I'm sure every single person who voted in favor of this considered the implications of indicting the former president of the United States. This is the first time something like this has happened. It has never happened in the history of our country where our legal system is going to make a former president take a cakewalk. We're going to have to wait and see all the evidence laid out, right? Everybody deserves a due process. Everyone deserves a fair trial. Even Donald Trump. I know we could all say Orange Man bad, and we could take him and put him in a cage and, like, I don't know, hold the cage over a volcano or whatever other weird fantasy that any of you in chat might have, but everybody gets a fair trial. That's part of our system. That includes Donald Trump. And I believe it's also important, considering how many people just believe this is a witch hunt, for all of the evidence to be clearly laid out to the public and for this to be as transparent as a process as possible. Indicting a former president of the United States was never going to be non-controversial. Indicting a former president of the United States was never going to ignore all the press attention or fly under the radar or not be at all affected by all the public scrutiny that's being thrown its way. And it should be as transparent as possible. They should be explaining all the decisions and moves they make in the public eye when you're indicting somebody who's so directly involved in politics. The Manhattan's District Attorney's Office should do everything in its authority and power in order to not only make this process as transparent as possible, but try to remove any doubt about the idea that this is a politically motivated witch hunt. Now, there's certain people they are never going to convince, right? They're never going to convince Donald Trump. And because Donald Trump doesn't care if it's politically motivated or not. He calls it politically motivated and it's beneficial to him. In 2015, when he was running for the election, he was saying, if I lose, it's rigged. Same thing once he got through the Republican primary in 2016. In the lead up to the 2020 election, he said, if I lose, it's rigged. When he lost, he came out and he said it's rigged. Is that because he genuinely believed that it was rigged no matter what in every single election, in every single primary, in every single general election that he ever participated in? Possibly. But there's also the strong possibility, and this is what I favor, that he doesn't necessarily believe that in every instance. And so he's saying that in order to try to build opposition to people being able to take power away from him, or in order to explain any mess ups or failures that he could encounter. It's not due to his own fault because of horrible public statements he made or policy missteps or the mismanagement of the country. It's due to the elites or the deep state or some vague blob he can point to and blame all of the country's issues on, or all of his own political failings on. My goodness. God, man, this is such a crazy moment. And I know a lot of you guys might think that there's not really much use in trying to be this transparent, or much use in trying to prove that this isn't politically motivated. But whether or not we can convince everybody does not mean we shouldn't, make the effort to explain it to anybody who's willing to listen, and make it so we can at least convince the vast majority of people, as long as this isn't politically motivated witch hunt, which I don't believe it is until evidence is presented otherwise, that this is our system holding the most powerful amongst us accountable. Because there is a scenario here that I think looks good for our democracy, even though it's hard to imagine Donald Trump being indicted and it being healthy for the political divisions in our country, for the partisanship in our country, and not intensifying political violence possibly. But I do think this could be the start of a positive development in our country, and that is former presidents get away with crime quite frequently. Most of them are not as brazen as Trump, though, i.e. they commit as many crimes as him, or they do it as openly as him. And I'm not talking about international law. Right.
Burns is
the United States is not a signatory. Is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court for a reason. There's a reason why we introduced the Hague Invasion Act, to make it so we deal with our war criminals on our own terms, and they're not held to international standards. They're held to American standards. But I do think this is the start of a possibly good development in in American politics, depending on how this case goes and the evidence presented and how transparent the process is. I want us to be a country where the most powerful amongst us is held to the same standards as everyone else. There is nothing that angers me on a personal level more when it comes to just the issue of equality. When I see some case where some rich kid goes and drunk drives and kills some family of four, kills a pregnant mother, runs over a homeless person. The judge looks at the case and says, "Oh, what a sad, sad kid. I'm going to let you off the hook." Not because that was the best thing to do in the scenario, but because of the amount of access to resources and powerful friends in the family of that child, of that young man, of that young rich kid, he's able to get out of it scot-free. There's a rule that exists in basically all countries, no, in every country on the planet, that if you're rich and powerful, you're less likely to be held accountable for the negative things you do and the crimes you commit. You're less likely to be held accountable for your actions. Oh yeah, they call it affluenza, the poor disability inflicting rich people around the world that makes them just such wanted murderers and such horrible people. But we gotta let them off the hook. I don't want that level of accountability, which is non-existent, to continue for the rich and powerful in our society. And if this is the start of a development where presidents of the United States could possibly fear after office, they could get arrested if they commit crimes while in office, in pursuance of the office, or if they just commit crimes generally, I think that's a positive development for the office, because that means even the most powerful amongst us, those with the finger on the nuclear codes, the codes that could blow up the whole world, even they have to fear the rule of law. And I think that's important for a healthy, functioning, liberal democracy. Absolutely. I think that is healthy, and I actually think it's fantastic. I think it's a good thing, and I hope we see that in the United States. That might not even be developed with this particular case. I hope it's a launching pad to develop that culture in the United States, where presidents and the powerful, the ultra wealthy, live in fear of being held accountable for their actions. But it's also a possibility that this isn't the case, that there's not enough evidence, that they bundled it, that it doesn't inspire that culture, even if Donald Trump is held accountable, because maybe the narrative from Fox News, Tucker Carlson, that this political persecution holds up enough against what the Manhattan District Attorney puts forward. Who knows? But I hope that's a development we get out of this historic moment of a former president of the United States preparing to do a perp walk. My goodness, man, this is pretty crazy. We got any more updates on this? Trump's lawyer, Chris Kise, is that really his name? Called the indictment the lowest point in history for a criminal justice system. Really? It's the lowest point in history. We once took a mentally disabled man and like debated him into believing he murdered like a woman and then executed him for it. A criminal just it was illegal for like a black person and a white person to get married.
Morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
It was illegal for like a black person and a white person to be married or like have a child. It was illegal for people to not become a slave catcher. Where there were laws where if you found somebody who was an enslaved person who had fled to the north, they have to be returned. This is the darkest moment. The darkest moment is when the New York businessman turned con artist politician gets held accountable. Ron's coming swinging? Oh no. Dude, is he... The weaponization of the legal system to advance a political agenda turns the rule of law on its head. It is un-American. The Soros-backed... Why does that matter? How does he prove that the Soros-backed Manhattan District Attorney's Office has consistently bent the law to downgrade felonies and to excuse criminal misconduct. Yet now he is stretching the law to target a political opponent. Florida will not assist in the Dude, you know what it is? I think a lot of people just, after seeing like murders and well, maybe not murders, after seeing people like smoke pot and get like 5 years in prison, or people like do nonviolent drug offenses and get such harsh sentencing, after seeing that and seeing white collar criminals get off so many times, the idea of a white collar criminal actually being held accountable is now an offensive idea to many people. It is an offensive idea to say that you committed a crime like, say, tax fraud, or you committed a crime like, say, paying hush money payments out of campaign finances to a prostitute you banged. That is now become an offensive act towards people like Ron DeSantis. It's an offensive act. The Soros-backed Manhattan District Attorney has consistently bent the law to downgrade felonies and excuse criminal misconduct. Yet now he is stretching the law to target a political opponent. Florida will not assist in the extradition request given the questionable circumstances at issue with this Soros-backed Manhattan prosecutor and his political agenda. Okay, so to be clear, Ron DeSantis' argument is, wow, we will not cooperate with this trial because Soros, or a Soros-affiliated organization, backed the Manhattan district attorney in, I guess, his effort to become the Manhattan district attorney. Therefore, because Soros backed him, we will not hand him over because politics.